really excited about our ability to celebrate. Did we figure out recording, Maha, or shall I try to find a way to do that? Are we okay? All right, wonderful. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So this is our monthly halaqa, but every March we have a special halaqa, which is which we try to really address women's history, and this year is no different. So welcome to all of you, and I hope that today we will leave really feeling like the history of Muslim women is something that we know very little about, and that we will leave feeling like it is something that we are proud of, and that it is something that we are really excited to join as a legacy, so that we will move forward in this time, in this place, to carry forward the history and the legacy that came after us into what's coming forward for us. All right, great. So we're going to talk about today leaving a legacy. Can you bring out my PowerPoint, please, and set it up there? You'll see in this PowerPoint the picture of something that is a fractal. And what I want us to think about today as we go through these centuries, I want us to think about the fractal of existence. And what the fractal of existence is, it's that the idea that everything has a pattern, even things that look like chaos. When we look at our history, and we look at especially the history of Muslim women, I feel like it almost seems chaotic. Between colonialism, between post-colonial dictatorships, between Western influences and globalization, between all of these other things, it almost seems chaotic. But the reality is, this is based on some modern theories in chaos theory, that there is no such thing as real chaos. There is always a pattern of existence. And I think it's important as Muslim women that we look for the pattern of our existence, so that we understand that our history is a history of scholarship, a history of community care, and a history of tarbiyah. And when we begin to understand that, we can settle into the pattern as it will manifest itself now in the 21st century. When we bring that pattern forward, we end up with a very beautiful pattern, like this fractal, so beautiful. It's a close-up, right? We can create a beautiful pattern for generations to come. So that's what I want us to think about. So when we think about it, we are looking back and asking, what was left for us and what will we leave? We are about to go through 15 centuries of female scholarship. In those 15 centuries, we will find all sorts of things, but we will only talk about one woman in these centuries. I want us all to remember and be very clear, that does not mean that there was only one woman in that century who did good work. In fact, it means quite the opposite. There are many others that we know and many that we don't know. It's like a basketball team. If you're on a basketball team, or if you know a basketball team, what do you know about the basketball team? Who do you know that's on the team? Even if you're a basketball fan, you probably only know the names of the 2 or 3 the center, the people that score the most, and you don't know all the names of the rest of the people on the team, but they're all together winning. And I think it's the same when we look back in history and we find women that stand out. That's like the center. That's like the star, Karim Abdul-Jabbar, for example. But all around them were other women working, other women contributing, other women scholars, and etc. All of these different things. So that's what I want us to think about as we go forward, and just consider each of these women, that they were not alone. As we feel whatever we feel when we see them, we understand that there were more with them. Okay? All right. So first we're going to do the first century, and we're going to talk about Tabi'iyya, Amra bint Abdurrahman. I want to make a note about all of the paintings you are about to see, all of these renditions of what they look like. This is research that was done back in 2016. Here at Rabata, we had a campaign, we called it She Is Me. And for each century, we had an artist. We did research and we looked at what women dressed like in that area and that time. And we gave this research to an artist, and together we came up with artist renditions of these women. You'll note that a lot of these women are a little older than usually what you see when people create art about women of history. One of the reasons for that is because we have an issue today, which is in the secular world. One moment, excuse me. Sorry, excuse me one moment. Okay. In the secular world, there is real value given only to young women who are sexually attractive. And so we have this whole commodization of the woman's body. And as a result, even when people look back in history and find women who are strong and political or religious or whatever, they represent them in art and in very sexual ways. So we really wanted to change that dynamic and change that narrative. And so we instead recognize that as accomplished women of faith, they would be first of all dressed differently. If you look online, you'll find Razia Sultan. Usually the way she's dressed is in a very low cut dress. In the drawings, like there's no photographs of her, with very large chest and very revealing. It's really horrible. And of course she wouldn't have dressed like that. It's really shocking to think that we as Muslims accept that as well. And we just accept these drawings as though they were correct. And they aren't. They are drawings or paintings done by people who have thought about what they might have looked like without any regard for fiqh or any regard for Islamic precepts. And so this art is very purposely done and very thoughtful. Okay, so the first one is Amra bint Abd al-Rahman. Amra bint Abd al-Rahman was a student of Aisha radiallahu anha. She is evidence of the chain of ilm, the chain of scholarship that began at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and especially with the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. This particular presentation does not speak about the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen or the companions of that time, and but because that's like a different discussion, that would take so long to talk about. Instead, we begin with the first century after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or in that first century, someone who was not of the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. But what is very important here is that Amra was a carrier of the message of Aisha. She was a carrier of the Senate. So nowadays we have those shuyukh who will tell us that women don't have a Senate. Women don't have a connecting back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is absolutely untrue for 1,000 reasons. But one of them is evidenced right here in this place, in the work of one of the women of this era, which is Amra bint Abd al-Rahman, because she was a great student and a direct student of Aisha, and so she begins that step in the legacy of female scholarship. One of the things we want to know about her, outside of her being a scholar, outside of her being a jurist, is that her rulings, her fatwas, were considered more valuable than other male colleagues of the time. That's only important because we have a stereotype or an idea about the early days of Islam or the Arabs or what have you. We have a stereotype maybe about Sharia, I don't know, that says that a man's opinion is more valuable than a woman's opinion. Whereas here we see, at a time when people were still in the connectedness to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to the truth of those best generations, we have a woman whose opinion is more valuable. The evidence of that is here, that when she once heard of a case on the other side of town, she wasn't there, she heard of it. Someone came and told her about it. It had been decided, and the messenger came to her with the story. She heard the case, told the messenger boy, or called the messenger boy and told him, listen, you need to go to this court case because the ruling is wrong. Now, just think about that someone would go to a judge today, not in the court, and say the ruling is wrong and yet be respected and listened to. It's really like almost nearly impossible to think that might be, that might happen. And yet, it did. So we see in that her, Amra bint Abdurrahman, we see her value to this society. We see her intellectual contribution and her justice contribution to the society and the elevated respect that the society held for her so that she could be the person that carried forth the knowledge of that Aisha radiallahu anha gave her. So I'm trying to fix my lighting so I can see you. That's better. Okay. So that is Amra bint Abdurrahman. Amra bint Abdurrahman is a very important person of our history, and it would be really wonderful to talk about her for a full hour. But let's go to the next century, where we continue to see the following up of female scholarship and our contributions to our history. We have Sayyida Nafisa al-Tahira. If you are Egyptian, you know her. If you live in Egypt, you've probably visited her grave. If you live in Egypt and you haven't visited her grave, I would like to recommend that you actually do so. She died in 208. And she was a really interesting woman. She was born in Medina. She became Hafiza at a very early age, and she became a Mufassira. So Mufassir, we don't have very many women. In fact, we don't have a written book of a woman who is a Mufassira. But she was known to be a woman who explained the Quran, as well as a jurist and a hadith scholar, etc. But this is really important, that she was indeed a Mufassira. She used to pray at the Prophet's mosque with her father when she was even just 5 years old, all of her farud prayers. So we see this and how it affected her. She was very much a person of ibadah and worship. She would spend long nights in prayer. And the story of her in Egypt is really interesting. She became not only popular, but important to the people. And they kept coming to her and coming to her and coming to her and coming to her until the day came when she was overwhelmed by them. And we can imagine that she really had no peace at all, no space. And so she decided to leave and go back to Medina. She packed her things and she was on her way. She was leaving. Now, she couldn't just go to the airport quietly in the night. It was difficult to leave. You had camels and all of the rest. And so people saw her leaving and they followed her out of the city, begging her not to go. In fact, the mayor or the governor or the leader of the area came to her and made a deal with her, negotiated with her to stay. Saying to her, please stay, and I will give you a house, and I will give you I think she was already receiving a stipend, but some other kind of stipend, but he's going to give her a larger house, and he's going to make sure that she has, I believe it was every other day or 2 days off during the week, where she would not receive people. So he helped her organize her time and protected her really from people coming in and overtaking her time. And she stayed in Egypt then. So later when Imam Shafi'i will come to Egypt, he will learn from her, and she becomes one of the teachers of the Shafi'i school because she is one of the teachers of Imam Shafi'i. So that's Sayyidina Nafisa al-Tahira. If you go to Egypt, or even it's a reason to go to Egypt, to go to visit her grave, give her salams, and you can tell her about the state of the world today and how we have a whole bunch of women learning the Shafi'i school at Rabat, and that Imam Shafi'i originally, she'll remember that, she'll know that he originally learned from her, and so who knows how much of her teaching is still carried forth in the Shafi'i school and in the very prayers that we pray every day. Going forward to Fatima al-Fihri, that of course is, we go farther north, we go farther west in Africa towards Morocco. And Fatima Al-Fihri was born in Tunisia, and her father moved the family to Al-Maghrib, to farther west, when she was an older child. And when they reached Al-Maghrib, where she lived, they lived there for a while, and eventually her father died. Now, she and her sister, they were very religious, and a very religious family, and they were raised to really understand Islamic thinking and to have himmat ad-din. So himmat ad-din means a person who's raised to know that our role in life is to contribute to this life and contribute to the people around us walking on the path. So she, after her father died, and she took her inheritance, and with her inheritance, she began to build what will become the oldest academic degree-granting institution in the world today. It's a University of Qarawiyyin, and it's truly an amazing thing. The whole idea of degree-granting universities and such will come from this institution. So the legacy that she's left is quite unbelievable. They began to build this institution when she was fasting. It was Ramadan. And so she decided that to keep the barakah, the blessing of the work, she would continue to fast until the project was complete. And she did. She fasted for 3 years. So she fasted for 3 years while they were building the Qarawiyyin University. And and mashallah, and the blessing is that even today, it's open. Even today, you can go and visit it. In those early days, it was a real magnet of scholarship. In fact, even non-Muslims, including the Pope of that time, one of those early times, I want to say Pope Sylvester, but I feel like, I don't know, could that possibly be right? Actually studied there at that institution. And people would go there to learn Arabic because they knew that the Arabic language was the language of scholarship. SubhanAllah. And I just want us to note that she devoted her money, her time, and herself to the development and success of this great institution. She was indeed an institution builder. And we see today other institution builders, but maybe we don't always recognize what they're doing. Here at Rabata, for example, there are 2 women, 3, well, actually I'm going to say 3 or even more. There have been a number of women, a handful of women, who have helped us to build this institution. From the woman who we met in Florida in 2012, we never even thought of creating a nonprofit. We never even thought of doing this kind of thing. And she came and handed us a check for $5,000 and said, what you're doing needs to be formalized. You need this. You need to do this. And we were like, wow. And that was real institution building right there, because she got us thinking. And then there's the unnamed woman who from day one has given us really a large amount of her salary without any sort of just giving it. And because of that, we've been able to count on that and build institutions build this institution. And then the women who have saw little projects along the way or bigger projects and then just automatically given of themselves. These are all women that have been part of this institution building. And I see them as connected to Fatima Al-Fihri in her work. Like, we look at her and we say, wow, she did that and recognized what she was doing was taking care of the next generations. And so let's go to the next generation. In the fourth century, we have Maryam al-Jalliya al-Astrolabiyya, which means just the astrolabe woman. And this is really interesting because now we go to a woman who is a woman of science. So there's real development here. I mean, we also, when we were choosing women, we tried to choose women from different fields so we could recognize that, so we could see and recognize all the different ways that women built a legacy for us to look back to, and all the different ways that we can build a legacy going forward. So those of you who are scientists, here's Maryam, or engineers. Here's Maryam. She was a scientist, an early engineer, and she was a designer and a builder of astrolabes. Now, for us, that might sound like something. Oh, what's that? But really, that's like saying she was an app builder. She was a person who built computers or smartphones or things like this, things to make life easier through technology. And she had that kind of vision. Okay, she had that kind of vision, and because of that, the Saif ad-Dawla, who was the ruler, hired her. I want you to just see that word. He didn't ask her to volunteer. He didn't say, you're a woman, you don't really need money. He hired her as the official astrolabe engineer of the government. Let that sink in for a little while. This is in the 4th century of Hijrah. So you say 4 plus 7, like this is like the 12th century. What woman do you know in the world that was being hired because she was an engineer, because of the amazing work she did, and respecting that and really looking up to that field? Of course, for Muslims, astrology is really important because it has to do with astrology, it has to do with astronomy, it has to do with really seeing what direction we're going to pray. All of this was really in direction for travel, all sorts of things. And so it's the app in your phone. So when you go somewhere and you click on whatever your app is, I pray, and to see what direction you pray, for hundreds of years, it was an astrolabe that would help you know these kinds of things. Her contribution to the field was really unequaled by anyone else. She was a leader in the field. That's not to say that nobody else worked in the field, but she was a definite leader in the field and remained employed for 30 years in this work. 30 years. Inshallah. Let's go to the next century, and we find, I have to admit, I have a softness in my heart for this woman. I have softness in my heart for all of them, but there's something about Karima bint Ahmed al-Marwaziyya that really touches my heart. I think part of it is because she was originally from Turkmenistan, so she's from far away. She's from far away. And yet she comes to Mecca and she becomes known as the Meccan Sheikha. The Meccan Sheikha. So she's not originally from Mecca. She's not Qurayshi. But she becomes known as the Meccan Sheikha. And she's known to be a very strict giver of ijazas, or strict sheikha, strict teacher. And they write about her, the students write about her, that she, unlike the other teachers of the time, that you would not, even if you had recited her books of hadith, you were not allowed to copy them out without her supervision. She wanted to check and make sure that you were copying them out correctly. She had very specific requirements for someone to get an ijaza from Sheikha Karima bint Ahmed al-Marwaziyya. And that made her ijaza very valuable. And again, that's something we're trying to do here at Rabata. We want our degree systems, our certificates, to feel valuable to people because we are asking for real study and asking for real results. So we hope we won't send out into the world someone who can't read any Arabic, who can't recite the Quran. Somebody that I know, I'm gonna keep this anonymous, but somebody that I know was telling me about a program in a university here in the United States, or actually whatever, in an institution here in the United States, that gives a chaplain degree. And she said, this chaplain degree is going to people who can't even recite the Fatiha correctly. Imagine how we're sending people out. And I'm not saying that all chaplains are like that, and I'm not trying to disparage the field of chaplaincy. It's a very important field. What I am saying is that as Muslims, as people who are striving to be leaders in the field of chaplaincy, there are basic things that we should take on. And Karima set this example for us when she was like, you want to be a muhaddith? Then I want to see what you've got here. I want to make sure that your ability to write this is accurate. And then I give you my ijaza to teach what I've given. So, so we just see examples of other mistakes. When we look back and see these beautiful things, we say, wow, we need to carry forth the wisdom of the past and the wisdom of these women and the legacy these women left for us. And Karima bint Ahmed al-Marwaziyya is one of them. Of course, I'm not mentioning for all of them their ibadah and their worship, but they were all known so far. In fact, the whole list today, everyone is known for their ibadah. I mentioned it a little bit, but I'm not dwelling on it. Then we go to the 5th century with Fatima bin Sa'd al-Khair. Fatima bin Sa'd al-Khair is really interesting because her parents come from Spain. They come from Andalusia. And they moved to China. Think about the Muslim world. Like sometimes we think that we're so advanced, you know. Wow, mashallah, we travel, we this. They went from Spain to China. And she was born there. And then her family was a family of scholars. And they would travel looking for learning and teaching. And so she would travel. And especially her father was interested in Fatima bin Sa'd al-Khair's learning. He was especially interested in her ability to gain hadith and to gain knowledge. And so she traveled with him, and they traveled together. But what I've read is that she traveled with him as they sought both teachers and hadith across the Muslim world. They lived in China for a while, and then they traveled back. They went to Medina, they went to Baghdad, they went to other places. She was known to be very pious. She was known to be a muhadditha and to be very, very generous. Another quality we see in these women is their generosity. Go back again and look at Fatima al-Fihri, that generosity. Fatima bin Sa'd al-Khair was known for her generosity. Nafisa was known for her generosity. It's part of the ethos of this type of work. And she actually married, and someone, I believe it was from Damascus, they lived in Damascus for a while, and she taught there first, but then she went to Cairo, and she spent most of her time in Cairo. She left a lot of students, and a lot of students behind who learned deen from her, who she taught, male and female. SubhanAllah. Now let's cross the oceans and go to the first Muslim governance in India. It was called the Delhi Sultanate, and the first leader of the Delhi Sultanate was Razia Sultan's father. He was a very good man, a man of faith, and when he died, he had 4 sons in Razia. When he died, he said to her that you will take my place because his sons were worthless. We have him quoted here as saying, "This daughter of mine is better than many sons." And actually what happened is after his death, one of her brothers actually took the throne or took the leadership. But as her father says, he was a drunk and he was not able to hold on to leadership, and he almost ran the country into ruin. And then she took over, and she was a very devoted ruler. She was a woman of faith and piety. She established schools. She had research centers, libraries. And one of the things I really like about her is that she was a defender of minority rights. So she made sure that in this Muslim-ruled area, that minorities, including ethnic minorities, but also minority faiths, were treated fairly and justly, which is really very advanced for the time and place if you think about it. I mean, today we're struggling with this. Today we're living in America. We're living in a political situation that is not at all concerned with caring for or defending the rights of minority peoples in this country. And this was a woman who in the 7th century Hijri was concerned about this. She has much more in her life, but we will go on to the next century, and now we will travel to Yemen. Next time I give this lecture, I want a map so we can just see where we're going. But in Yemen, we have Al-Adar Al-Karima. Karima is actually her honorific, not her name. Al-Karima means the generous one. She was the mother of the Sultan of Yemen, of that area, and he left. He left for 14 months, and in his stead, he left his mother in charge. She was actually one of the first philanthropists that we know of that we really, no, because philanthropy is a very wide, even Fatima al-Fihri would be a philanthropist. But in the way that we kind of define philanthropy, where the way we think about it today, someone who's really dealing with issues of human rights, etc. And she was known as a champion of the poor. She led Yemen for 14 months. And because she established, in those 14 months, just 14 months, she established schools, She opened new mosques, and she strengthened internal security. And she would find out who was poor, go visit them, go in their house, give them money, and then go back and check. Are they still in need? How's it going? Subhanallah. And I really think that when we look back and see how she strengthened internal security, that's partially because you have a more secure country when you're taking care of the citizens. It's like a really basic lesson that all of our governments, I imagine, need to learn. Take care of the citizens instead of your own pockets, and you will find internal security, gratefulness, and just loyalty. SubhanAllah. Back to India, or back to the Indian subcontinent, we have Bibi Raja. I like her because she's very different than the others, and she does not hold a political office. She is not considered a scholar necessarily, but she is like a diplomat. She's a stateswoman. She's well connected. She has between her family and her friends, etc. And many people in this world today are well connected. They know people, but they don't use that for good. In fact, we've developed this sort of thing where, oh no, I can't ask them, for this whatever because because I'll feel humiliated or what have you. Bibi Raja was the opposite of that. She connected people, and she used all these people that had position. She used her own position in society as well as her connection to other women for charitable projects and educational programs. It's amazing. And she was able to build mosques, schools, religious retreat centers. What? This is what we're trying to do. I mean, we're not, it's not a formal announcement, but it's up here. It's here. And bridges. And bridges. I love that addition. Bridges, because of the importance of bridges to get around and connect people. She also would sponsor scholars. So she would give scholars a stipend or a prize or like a salary, what we could call a salary today, so they could continue in their scholarly work. She was a visionary woman who understood the need to support these cultural and educational projects and people for the betterment of society. Yani, mashallah, mashallah, mashallah. And this is the thing, there's a University of Indiana. They have the very first master's degree in philanthropy in the nation. There are others now, but theirs was the first, and also doctorate. And the Muslim Philanthropy Association comes out of there with Dr. Shariq, who is part of what they do. But I was thinking about them the other day, and they have a class there called Women in Philanthropy, where they have a lot of research showing that in the world today, women are really an untapped resource of philanthropy, because there's misogyny and sexism in philanthropy as well, and people speak to the men and say, donate, right? And subhanAllah, when we look at our history, what we see is because of the financial independence of women, women had money, and women had the ability to build in their societies, the ability to carry and create institutions, to support scholars, to build schools and mosques, to build retreat centers. SubhanAllah, like if they have vision, I mean, certainly she didn't build them with her own hands. She connected people together. She made it happen. She made it happen. And this is something that Islam, it's like a built-in beauty. It's like a built-in beauty that women really have the capacity. Like in this course, I haven't taken it, but I read about it. I'm thinking about taking it. They talk about this untapped thing. And I was thinking, subhanAllah, how in Islam, we have a history of both financial independence and giving. Whereas in other parts of the world, there is not a history of financial independence. There isn't a practice of giving in families. There isn't a practice of women giving on their own. There's family giving. But subhanAllah, historically, we have women giving on their own and leading giving projects as well. MashaAllah. Okay, let's go to Africa, let's go to Africa below the Saharan Desert. And we've got here Queen Aminatu of Zaria. Tough, strategic, tough, strong woman. When she was 16 years old, her mother became queen. So we see her having an example of leadership in front of her. She was in the military, and eventually she was a fighter. She was taught how to fight as a young woman, I should say it that way. And eventually, when she did become the leader, she ruled Zadia for 34 years. She took it from her brother. Her brother had become king after her mother abdicated or died. I think she died. And then she took it from her brother. And subhanAllah, like what she did in this place was what we would normally not consider feminine ruling. And again, this just teaches us that the the breadth of what women have done for our communities throughout the world. It was a very dangerous time and place to live. If you wanted to travel for trade, which most people had to do, even today you have to travel for trade, and you're concerned about losing your ticket or losing your investment, etc. It was very dangerous, and you would often lose your caravan to highway robbers. And so she built a network of, on the trade route, she built a network of like fortresses, so that as you were traveling, there would always be safety. There would always be patrols. And she created places where they could stay so that all of a sudden there was safety. And because there was safety, there was economic prosperity. And she introduced into the area armor, helmets, and chainmail, which is so cool. And the houses, after that, they would build clay fortress walls around their military encampments, and she's the one who invented this idea to build this kind of a clay fortress to protect what was within so that people could stay there and protect the routes. So cool, right? Let's go back to the Indian subcontinent and meet a woman in the 11th century who's very different than the women we've talked about today up until now. Again, remember that all the women we're talking about and the work that they do, we're certainly present in all of these centuries, but we've chosen one each century. I don't want you to think, oh, this is the only woman that, no. Mumtaz Mahal, I struggled if I wanted to talk about her or her daughter because they're both amazing. But Mumtaz Mahal, we have one of the wonders of the world built because of her, so I decided we have to talk to her about her. She had 14 children, which is why she's pictured here pregnant. 14 children. Bismillah, mashallah. And unfortunately, when she was giving birth to her 14th, she died. And she died, and her husband was in terrible grief. I want to back up a bit and say that she was a woman of great piety. In fact, one of the reasons one day I want to talk about her and her daughter together. In fact, I think I should write an article about her and her daughter, but anyway, I digress. Her daughter will become the de facto leader after her death because her father goes into such depression that he can only focus on his grief and the building of this, the Taj Mahal, which is going to be, of course, the monument to her that expresses to the world who she was. So their daughter Jihan is the one who takes care of the country, but she also becomes the leader of the spiritual tariqa or spiritual movement in India at the time, which is also a fascinating piece of their history. But let's talk about Mumtaz. One of the things that is said is that her husband learned tahajjud from her, and so always accredited her with his spiritual life, and as such looked up to her, trusted her fully. He gave her the imperial seal, which meant that she could do any decision. She had an imperial seal. She would travel with him on hunting trips, military expeditions. They were always together. It's really a very sweet love story, really, for those of us who are wondering if there are love stories in Islam. Of course there are, and here's one of them. And he was in so much grief when she died. And I see that as a grief of not only losing a wife, but losing a spiritual mentor. I believe her to have been his spiritual mentor. And that is the reason why he went into such grief. And that is the reason why not only did he build the Taj Mahal, but that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala it's like there's permission for that to be built. Because it's built and it stands tall. And it's visited by people of all faiths from around the world. To remember this Muslim woman, I wondered, who was she? She's like this woman that if we wrote about her today, mother, 14 pregnancies, 7 children lived, died in childbirth, we might not really understand who she was. And I believe there are women like that around us all the time. We don't understand who they are. But Allah sets an example for us of who she was by allowing this Taj Mahal to be built, and for us to visit it. And not everyone, I mean, who visits it? Everyone and anyone who can afford to go there visits the Taj Mahal. So he wanted to speak of her greatness, and now it's one of the 7 wonders of the world. And indeed, the awliya are of the wonders of the world. The awliya, the friends of God, are of the wonders of the world. And so when you go to see the Taj Mahal, don't just see its architecture, see a physical representation of the awliya and their incredible impact and beauty that they have on this earth. And to the question of are there pictures being shown, I have a little PowerPoint that I am showing. If you're on your phone, it may be why you're struggling to see it, but I think there is a way. You just have to click over to that part. Then we're going to travel now up into the Ottoman era, an area. And we have Asma Ibrit, who was a completely different type of contributor to our history. Subhanallah, Warda, yes. We should do a Rabata trip to the Taj Mahal. That would be so perfect. We should do a Rabata trip to visit all these institutions built by women. We should go to Qarawiyyin, Taj Mahal, now we'll think. Oh, the gravesite of Sitna and Nafisa. Yeah, that'd be so cool. It'd be so cool. Well, Yemen, yes. SubhanAllah. Well, we shall. I don't think we can do one that does all of them. It would be very, very expensive. But let me chew on that one. Let's come back to Asma Abid. So this is a new type of contribution that's very important to add, which is the contribution of art. And it's a very unique type of art because she did calligraphy, and she did it so beautifully that she finished her first major work by the time she was 15, and it was a commissioned. What does that mean? At 15 years old, someone recognized her talent, hired her, and paid her to do a commissioned calligraphic description of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's so much to say about that. The beauty. Hadir Zainab. Hadir. Where is Najia? Hadir. Okay, so let's put that on our list as books to get out. Let's do a She Is Me book using these images and just this. It should be so easy. Not easy. Nothing's easy, but let's do it. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Forgot as I was saying. Yes, we can put it up as a PDF. It's not super fancy because these are just pictures. I can ask someone to make it better, to take that original picture and make it better. So let's also make note of that. Thank you, Calligraphy Commission. As you are commissioning me to turn this into a book, okay? She was commissioned. Commissioned. She was actually commissioned, and so you caught that, Layla, right? SubhanAllah, they understood back then to have her do that project was they commissioned it, right? You caught that link, SubhanAllah. Yeah, that's a good question, Layla. We need to think about how to do all of that. We can include that project in our annual sustainability fund, so that we are raising money for that project along with our other new projects for the year, and people can donate, and it will go into all of these projects. How's that? We'll tack a little extra on what the goal is. Okay? All right. So back to the story of the commission. So she's commissioned to do this incredible calligraphic description of the Prophet ﷺ, which also I think would be beautiful to be done in English with beautiful letters about who he is. Right? I mean, but the value of this, like they recognize that in talking about the Prophet ﷺ wasn't just beautiful words that we say, It's beautiful words that are written. And that her talent was good enough that she can be paid for this. And when she did it, it was presented to the Sultan, who was so pleased. He gave her, on top of the commission, a monetary prize, and then started giving her a salary because her work was, for her work, recognizing how great her work was. So it's like when you hire, like if we were to hire here someone to continue to make these books published. Oh, well, we have someone who does that. And somebody else would come and say, hey, that work you're doing? I want to give money to supplement that salary, because here we have supplementing this salary, right? To supplement that salary to make that move forward. That's what that would look. I just want you to understand what was going on back then, how they valued the work, okay? And because of that, she was given this honorific title of Ibret. Is like Anse. It's an honorific title because of her incredible work. It means an exemplary person. And because of her character and the work. So her character was seen in her work. Okay? I just realized something. So her last known work was completed when she was 28 years old. Yet we had her painted much older. I think we should redo that. So please make note, Maha. If we're going to make this book, we need to recommission that artwork. We need to make her younger, because that probably means she died very soon after that. SubhanAllah. And her last work, imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave her such a blessing that the last known work she did was the Quran. Imagine how many years that took, or how long that took for her to script and decorate the Quran by herself. In Malaysia, there's a beautiful initiative where they are scripting the Quran, artists, like someone has hired artists to script the Quran and decorate it according to cultural motifs and patterns. So they have a mushaf that is for Cambodia, the motifs and everything's for Cambodia. And they have one that was 100% done by women. The writing and the decorating and all of this. I've got to get that mushaf, inshallah. But imagine and it's really beautiful. And but it's all done. But here in this case, it's one woman who did the whole thing. And we can see it in both the Turkish museums and in private collections. Imagine having a piece of that. You know what we have to do for our fundraiser? We need to find someone who has some of her work and auction it off. And use that money to come into all of the illustrations and artwork for the books that we publish. Yani subhanallah. All right, let's go back to Africa with one of the incredible women, Nana Asma'u. I believe her to have been a mujaddida. A mujaddida is a person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about, who will come every 100 years, man yujaddid dinakum, who will face the crises of that time or place, face the crisis, and bring a cure for the crisis. We have a class at Rabata called Al-Mujaddidun, I think, crises and cures. And Nana Asma'u, one of the reasons I believe she was a mujaddid because of her work, and I believed that for a long time. And then I found in one of the letters that was written to her by a scholar of her age, he calls her the mujaddida in the very flowery introduction, al-mujaddidat al-qarn. And when she responds, she doesn't say no to that. So I believe she was a mujaddida. Allahu alam, and Allah knows, and we don't have to know exactly who they are. Whether she was a mujaddida in the heavens or not, she certainly had a great impact on this earth. She was a great scholar. She was a poet. She was an activist. She was a pedagogue. She was a teacher extraordinaire. All of you who are teachers, she's definitely worth studying. Her methodology was really something. Oh, thank you, Kartina. So that is the link to the place of the people who do the beautiful writing of the Quran. If you haven't been to Malaysia, you have to go to Malaysia because it's a beautiful place to go to, and it's just an incredible people, and we've got Rabata Malaysia, so I should go there. Anyway, also have Soto when you go. And this year, by the way, I have to side note this, and we'll focus on Nana Asma'u. This year for our leadership and legacy curriculum, which will be uploaded on Sunday, inshallah, International Women's Day tomorrow. We are highlighting a woman you've never heard of unless you're Malaysian. You've never heard of. Her name is Tun Fatima Hashim. and she was a woman who did incredible things in Malaysia. I'm not gonna give any spoilers here. You'll read about her tomorrow, and may hopefully. Oh, you wrote about her. What? I would love to read what you've written. We have a unit about her. We have a teaching unit about Nana Ismail as well. Um, Nana Ismail's work is really incredible. She also had this thing called cultural competence, which is really amazing too. Anyway, so um, this it's hard to talk about everything that she did in the very short time that I have here. So I'm not going to pretend. Please note that I'm not saying everything. She has so much, but just want to say that she had karama. So she's known for her spirituality. She was a woman of great worship, Quran, scholarship. But on top of that, she also had great creativity and himmat-ad-din. Like, she saw that there were thousands of new converts. She was worried about the future. She was worried about their children, that they didn't know about Islam. So she literally developed a curriculum to teach them and a new methodology to reach them to ensure the perpetuation of ilm and women scholars. And another beautiful thing she did is she wrote about her teachers. So unlike other places of the world that kind of hid the presence of women scholars, she wrote about them. So you can read about their piety and who they were in her poems. So she really gave us a gift for posterity. It's like she's the beginning of this new era when women are living different lives and much more public lives. And she gives us this gift to learn about these women so we can be like them. So there are many more, and many more in the same area of her own students in this particular century. But yeah, mashallah, there are actually lots of books out there about her, so I really would recommend that you read One Woman's Jihad, The Caliph's Sister, Educating Muslim Women. Those are three that come to mind. Or you can just read our unit plan, which is on the website. You can check it out tomorrow when it is International Women's Day. All right, in the 14th century, which was last century, we are now in the 15th century, we have Amina as-Silmi, and she was a convert. And when I became a Muslim in 1985, she had already been a Muslim for 8 years, and she was already on the speaker circuit. So she used to speak at ISNA and the different conferences. I would look at her and I'd be like, I want to be her. I want to be her. I want to be able to talk about Islam. And subhanAllah, here we are. Unfortunately, she died in 2010 after she worked so hard for the Muslim community. She worked so hard for the guidance of her family. Again, you can read more about her on the website tomorrow. But two things that she did: she established the Eid stamp that we have here in the United States, and it's a forever Eid stamp now. President Obama made it a forever stamp. But she established the fact that the post office has an Eid stamp at all. And she also did something really important. I think it's pretty shocking for us to imagine that rape was not considered a war crime, but it wasn't until the Bosnian War. May Allah help all the people of Bosnia. We also have an affiliate in Bosnia, Halaqa. And we love all of our Bosnian sisters. And Bosnia is a beautiful country. The first time I went there, I felt as though the Prophet ﷺ was on the streets of Bosnia. It's so beautiful. But there was a time of great pain and great difficulty in Bosnia that is in our own memory, our own modern day memory, and that is the war in Bosnia. And during that time, rape was not considered a war crime. Can you imagine? And so Amina as-Silmi was part of an organization, a part of a worldwide effort to make rape a war crime, and they succeeded. And when the National Organization of Women, were the group that she worked with, was celebrating this, and they were going to have an award, they told her, we don't want you on stage. Imagine. They were fighting against rape against Muslim women. But when it came, they told her, we don't want you on stage because of her hijab. But she fought them too, and she got on stage. And she was there standing on stage with them when they were celebrating and taking credit for this very important effort. Yeah, so she was really an amazing woman. In 2010, she was in a car accident, and she died. And it's very sad thing, you know. But she... SubhanAllah, we put up her curriculum unit a few years back. It was one of our first, and like last year, I think it was, her son found it. He must have been just Googling his mother's name. Her son found it and he wrote us a very touching letter. In fact, let's find that letter so that when I talk about her, I can read the letter because it's really touching. And he's thanking us for remembering her and remembering her good work. And I can imagine it must be really sad for him to think how much his mother gave to the Muslim Ummah and then how much she must feel forgotten by the Muslim Ummah today. And I'm really pleased that we remembered her. And the reason that she's dressed like that is because that's actually how she dressed. It was really she didn't always dress like that in her later life, but that's how I remember her. So, subhanAllah, it was a very unique style just for her, subhanAllah. All right, alhamdulillah. So, happy Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day, everyone. It is for some of you already tomorrow, so it is already International Women's Day for you. I invite you to visit our website tomorrow when hopefully we will have a brand new website for you. And in celebration of International Women's Day, if you are in Minnesota, I invite you tomorrow to daybreak, where we will have a special dhikr and dua day in solidarity and in honor of all the women of the world, past and present, as we make dua for women and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as women on this very beautiful day. If you are not in Minnesota, I want to suggest that you do that with your own sisters and female relatives, that you sit down and remember Allah and think about what does it mean to be a Muslim woman today, and how can we do a better job contributing to our ummah and uplifting and upholding everyone around us. Also tomorrow we will be uploading our brand new unit which is a free download. It's always been, our curriculum materials have always been free downloads, so make sure that you do find ways to get these into schools. And if you want, reach out to us and we will help you do that. The last thing I want to say is that, inshallah, Amber, for international, well, okay, inshallah, we will work really hard on getting that ready and putting it up on the website, okay, with the rest of it, inshallah. All right, that's going to take us a little bit of time. Yes, don't forget that we are still in Rajab. And it is the month of Tawbah and Istighfar. So if you, please, as you do your Istighfar, register, put them at the link. We're adding them up and reporting on them. That first link is for information. Is it for you, Warda? It's for Warda's article about Nana Isma'u. The second link is our own leadership and legacy stuff on the website. And the third link is for the Rajab Istighfar. Please join us in collecting them because I'm hoping for a collective tawbah. As Nabi Nuh says to us in the Quran, reminds us that in tawbah, when we do it together, we seek the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are entering into the fundraising season. So I'm hoping in our tawbah of this month, we will open the doors for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send us money that we need so that we can support our new women in Nigeria, all of our new students in Nigeria, so that we can create teen programs for next year, and so that we can work on these kinds of books and things that you want us to do. All right, so also really quickly, we have 2 workshops coming up. Please sign up for them. As a woman, sometimes we feel like money and Islamic investments is not part of us. Make sure you get into Islamic investments. Take care of your money, ladies. Yes, the newsletter mailing list, we will have Halaqa info there, inshallah. Also, the workshop for speed reading. If you want to read 4,000 words a minute, check out that speed reading course. And finally, we have every year, we like to honor the women of today that are imitating the companions of the past. And so this year, we ask you to nominate the women who you feel are the modern day Shifa bint Abdullah. Now, this year we're honoring a woman that maybe we don't all know. And so I would like to say, so you'll be learning about her. Go to the link and you'll read the categories that are possible, and nominate the women that you know, because the women that you know, if they get nominated, we will let them know that they've been nominated, and so they're going to feel really good about that too. And then we will have winners in every category. I believe we have 9 categories. So alhamdulillah, and we'll honor them for being here with us. Oh my goodness! Also, if you are a Tajweed teacher, we have a special Tajweed course coming up at the end of March in New Haven, Connecticut. That is only open to people who are actually already proficient in Tajweed. So if you are still a learner, that would not be open to you. But if you are a teacher of Tajweed or Quran, you're welcome to come and brush up on your Tajweed and brush up on your teaching methodology at this workshop. All of our teachers were the first to be invited, of course, those who are volunteering for us, of whom we have so many. And if you're on today, I want to just thank you for your unending volunteer, heartfelt work in the Quran with people all over the world that sometimes you know and very often you don't know. And finally, the other one on the right, I keep saying finally, registration is open for our Rabat retreat. We will be in Dallas this year, which is much easier to get to than it was. We loved New Mexico last year. Loved it, loved it, loved it. But it was hard for people to get to. So this year we are in Dallas. And if you go to the registration, you'll find that we do have an option for babysitting. So definitely check it out and sign up for a Rabat retreat, July 17th, 21st in the summer. Right after that will also be, I don't think we have a flyer up yet, but right after that will be our youth camp. So if you have teens, sign up for that if they're in the United States. Oh, there it is. And if your teens are in the UK, oh, mashallah, they're right there. The teen camp in the US is July 24th to 27th. If you have teens in Europe or in the UK, that is in August 18th, 15th to the 18th. And I'll be at both. And be really excited to meet your teens and start building the next generation of women scholars and the rising tide of Muslim women scholars, leaders, and community care agents. Okay. Thank you, Layla. Thank you all. May Allah reward you all. And I thank you for your support in all the things that we do and in your own lives, supporting this work by carrying forth the legacy of all of these women and Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, and inshallah building a space for more women to come in the future. Kisses and hugs to you all. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.